Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. And we continue with our study of the book Differences of the Imams. This is the fourth session, and now we go to the third reason that we find apparent contradictions between the narrations. Right? And we're still dealing with the prophetic period. Remember that in the first session after the introduction, we talked about the relationship of this book to the history of fiqh. And we said that I entitled the section as the prophetic error, right? And it is mentioned that the section is also called the error of the messenger, right? The error of the messenger. Part 1, the error of the messenger. And the reason why I call it the prophetic period, actually, is because that's what we find in the history of fiqh. And it's not something that, that's new, because the section is entitled the error of the messenger, but I just highlighted this point in these sessions so that it's fresh in the mind, because it's clear in the reading. When we look at the top of the pages, we find, especially on the right hand side at the top of the pages in this section, the error of the messenger, we find it entitled the error of the messenger. So that's key. So the third reason for why we find apparent contradictions between the narrations is similar to the second reason, but it's what the principle in reverse. So the principle is that a general order is taken as a special case. So the third reason, Maulana Zakaria says, Rahmatullahi alayhi rahmatan wasi'ah. The third reason for the apparent contradictions between narrations is the opposite of the second reason. In other words, Allah's Messenger, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, mentioned something as an all-encompassing rule, but the narrator confined it to specific individuals. So the way that the hadith was narrated, it was narrated as what? A general rule, that it applied to everyone. But then the person who narrated specified it, making it what? Seem as though the text only pertains to particular individuals. One example is the narration of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu regarding the punishment of the deceased, right, upon the crying of his or her relatives. Ibn Umar narrated this as a general rule. Same hadith that we dealt with before. Now we're looking at it again. Aisha radiallahu anha, on the other hand, said that this applied only to a particular incident of a Jewish woman who was being mourned by her family, right? So we have two different opinions in this regard. And by the way, Ibn Umar has a different methodology than Aisha. Ibn Umar, the tendency in his fiqh and understanding is to not look at the rationale of the ruling. We're not going to say that he was a literalist, although that is there, because in this time period, unfortunately, the idea of literalism or being a literalist is something that's looked down upon. And we run the risk of being disrespectful or, being distasteful in our dealing with the methodologies of the companions, right? And this is a time period in which the issue of etiquette and respect and adab is out the door when it comes to scholarship. Matter of fact, we find this as a problem overall in speech, right? That people lack what they say as tact, right? And even when we get into the issue of political correctness in speech, there is a false sense of respect, right? It's not an authentic sense in that regard. So hence, for the revision of such narrations, a great need is felt for the mujtahids, right? Who are aware of all the types of narration. So the ulama of ijtihad, in this case, right, he's talking about those who combine fiqh and hadith. They're aware of the typing of the narrations, right? And so they have to be aware of how the narrations are understood and how they relate to each other. Alhamdulillah, in this case, you see, it's not an issue that's doubtful. It's an issue we know about it. It's an issue that we know about. But the average reader doesn't know. So the average reader can become confused. But the ulama, they're aware of this reality. That's why it's being conveyed to you that Ibn Umar narrated the hadith in this way and Aisha narrated it in this way. Radiallahu anhuma. Right? So in that case, we have a grasp of the situation. We have an understanding. There's no room for doubt in this case. We have an understanding of the typings of the narrations and how the narrations operate and how they were understood. So that gives us a sense of security and certainty in hadith and its sciences. Right? Rather than say that the narrations were communicated to us with inaccuracies, right? And we're not sure how to work with them. No, we say we have principles to understand how to work with them. And we understand as well that the Sahaba took the narrations in certain ways. Radiallahu anhum ajmain. Right? So the Mujtahid Imam comes and makes a decision, right? As in regards to how he's going to deal with the narration. Right? But in this time period, we say this is the task of the muhaddith. Right? The scholar of hadith who's well versed with the narration. So Shaykh al-Hadith, Mawlana Zakaria is a scholar of hadith, right? And we have many other ulama of hadith. Even though they have different tendencies and trends, we have many ulama of hadith that deal with the narrations and try to work with them. Sometimes they come to different conclusions, right? And that's within the within the spectrum of scholarship. So the important thing here is to become aware of how to type the narrations, right? So in this case, we have a hadith which is generated as a general order, but is taken as a special case, right? From these narrations, they are able to deduce who is he talking about? He's talking about the Mujtahid Imams. From these narrations, they are able to deduce which rules are of general application, which are special, and what the reasons are for rendering something permissible for one and impermissible for another. And we stop there, inshallah. So again, one of the reasons why we find apparent contradictions among the narrations and we find that the ulama of ijtihad differ with one another is because there are times in which a narration is narrated as a general order, but some take it as a special or specific case, right? So that is important as a principle. That's reason number 3. We ask Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala to forgive us, to have mercy on us, and to forgive Mawlana Zakaria and all of the ulama who are the keepers of the Sunnah, to forgive them their mistakes and their deficiencies, and to give them good for their efforts. And we ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to increase us in Iman and to make the love of Islam beloved to us, so that it's something that permeates our hearts, especially the love of the Sunnah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim wa barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد.